Imagine being blindsided by your own family. Imagine expecting inclusion, acknowledgement, and respect, and then being told you have no place in a legacy you believed was yours. That is exactly what Prince Harry and Meghan Markle faced in what is being described by insiders as the most shocking royal decision in years. A move that not only stunned the Sussexes but sent tremors throughout the palace, reverberated across the globe, and made headlines in every major media outlet within hours. Prince William, the heir apparent, had spoken, and his words were absolute. Only Catherine would oversee anything related to Princess Diana's legacy. Charities, tributes, public commemorations, global events, everything. Harry and Meghan were officially cut off. Permanently. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At first glance, this may seem like another chapter in the long-running saga of royal disagreements. Another story of family tension, sibling rivalry, or celebrity-level drama. But this is far more than that. This decision touches on history, inheritance, public perception, and the very essence of what Princess Diana's legacy represents. Diana was not just a princess. She was a global icon, a figure whose compassion and dedication transformed lives, raised awareness of causes, and challenged the very way the royal family interacted with the public. For William to take this step, for him to centralize Diana's legacy entirely under Catherine's stewardship, is more than a family decision. It is a calculated, seismic shift in the monarchy's public face. Think about it for a moment. Harry and Meghan, who have lived under intense media scrutiny, who have publicly spoken about their struggles with the press, and who have repeatedly claimed to be modernizing the royal approach to philanthropy, are now officially excluded from Diana's world. The very charities and initiatives that define their mother's life and purpose are now off limits. And this is not a small oversight or an accidental miscommunication. Insiders describe it as deliberate, meticulously planned, and executed with precision. William ensured that no room remained for ambiguity. The Sussexes' influence on Diana's legacy is over before it even began. You may be wondering, why now? Why make this decision at this exact moment, after years of Harry and Meghan having a certain degree of autonomy in public appearances and media projects? The timing, according to palace insiders, is strategic. William and Catherine have been quietly consolidating control over Diana's charitable footprint for months, coordinating with key trustees, senior staff, and international organizations connected to her work. By doing this now, William not only reinforces Catherine's role as the protector of Diana's image, but also ensures that any future events or memorials will remain aligned with the narrative he and Catherine intend to project. Essentially, he has drawn a line in the sand. And the fallout? Already, the palace is buzzing with speculation. How will Harry react publicly? How will Meghan manage this perceived slight? These questions are not merely idle curiosity. They strike at the core of royal influence, legacy, and the balance of power within one of the world's most scrutinized families. Royal watchers, journalists, and biographers have been predicting tension for years, but this is unprecedented. No one could have predicted the totality of William's decision. But let's pause and consider the human side of this story. Imagine being Harry, a man who has openly expressed his admiration and love for his mother, Diana. The charities, the causes, the public tributes, they were not just ceremonial duties. They were a connection to the woman who shaped his childhood, his worldview, and his sense of purpose. To be told, effectively, you have no role here, that the life's work and passions of your mother will be overseen exclusively by your brother and sister-in-law, is more than a professional setback. It is a personal blow, one that strikes at identity, belonging, and familial loyalty. Meghan's position is equally complex. She has been navigating an already fraught relationship with the royal family while attempting to carve out her own philanthropic and media presence. Diana's legacy, a beacon of compassion, global recognition, and transformative impact, would have been an obvious avenue for Meghan to align with, lending credibility and connection to the monarchy's most cherished icon. Instead, she now faces an official barrier. The message is clear. Any public association with Diana's work will be filtered through Catherine. Any attempt to step outside that boundary could trigger more than criticism, it could provoke a formal royal rebuke. The ripple effects of this decision extend far beyond the palace walls. Charities that have historically relied on the Sussexes' participation must now recalibrate. International events commemorating Diana will operate under a new chain of command. Media campaigns, interviews, and fundraising initiatives will be redirected or rebranded entirely. For years, Diana's work has been celebrated globally. William's decision now centralizes and controls that narrative in a way that leaves little room for deviation. And make no mistake, control over Diana's legacy is more than symbolic. Its power, influence, and the ability to shape public memory. Consider the irony. Diana, often called the People's Princess, was known for her accessibility, her empathy, and her willingness to step outside traditional boundaries. She was deeply involved with charities that challenged stigma, HIV awareness, landmine removal, mental health, and countless others. And yet, in her absence, her legacy is being carefully curated, tightly controlled, and centralized under a select few. It raises questions. Is this about honoring Diana's vision, or is it about consolidating influence within the royal family? Perhaps it's both. Perhaps the stakes are even higher than anyone realizes. And while the public reacts with curiosity and, in some cases, outrage, one element is certain. This story is far from over. Harry and Meghan are not known for silence in the face of perceived injustice. The Sussexes have navigated media storms before, sometimes quietly, sometimes explosively. Will they accept this exclusion, or will they challenge it, privately or publicly? The next moves could redefine the family's internal dynamics for years to come, and potentially alter public perceptions of the monarchy in ways that William and Catherine may not anticipate. So why should you care, as a viewer, about this decision? Because it is about more than family squabbles. It is about legacy, loyalty, and the control of history itself. It is about the battle over who gets to shape the narrative of one of the most beloved and scrutinized figures of the modern era. And it is about watching, in real time, the tension between two very different approaches to fame, responsibility, and family power. By the end of this story, you will know exactly how William made this decision, how Catherine has stepped into her new role, and how Harry and Meghan are grappling with being shut out. You will hear from palace insiders, charity trustees, and global commentators. You will see the strategic moves, the emotional reactions, and the potential consequences for the monarchy, for Diana's legacy, and for the Sussexes themselves. But here's the kicker. Just when everyone assumed the story was about exclusion and control, a new, unexpected twist emerges. One that no royal watcher, biographer, or media outlet predicted. One that has the potential to change everything about how Diana's legacy will be remembered, and who will ultimately have the final word on it. It started as an ordinary day at Kensington Palace, or at least, that's what anyone outside the palace walls would have thought. But inside, a decision was being forged that would shake the foundations of the royal family and leave two of its most high-profile members in utter shock. Prince William, heir to the throne, was not one to make impulsive moves. Calm, calculated, and strategic, he had spent months quietly considering the future of his mother's legacy. And when he finally spoke, the impact was seismic. Imagine being in a room, watching your sibling carefully consider every word, every implication, every possible fallout, and realizing that whatever is about to be said will change everything. William's aides, long accustomed to his deliberate approach, sensed the weight of the moment. There was a seriousness in his gaze, an intensity that hinted at decisions far beyond routine scheduling or ceremonial planning. What William was about to do would not merely redirect charity events or assign titles. It would redraw the map of influence within the family itself. And yet, Harry and Meghan, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, were operating under very different assumptions. They believed that their involvement in Diana-related charities and public commemorations was a given. They had, after all, positioned themselves publicly as loyal supporters of the causes their mother had championed. They had attended events, donated funds, and made public statements in ways that suggested they were, at the very least, stakeholders in Diana's legacy. But William's private decision was about to change all of that, permanently. The shock of the palace insiders who first learned of the decision cannot be overstated. Imagine being a royal aide, accustomed to navigating protocol, precedents, and sensitivity, and suddenly being handed instructions that upend everything you thought you knew. William had decreed, without hesitation, Catherine would oversee everything tied to Diana's legacy. Charities, tributes, commemorations, global events, every decision, every initiative, every appearance. Harry and Meghan were officially excluded. No exceptions. No shared responsibilities. No compromises. The reasoning, as William would later articulate to trusted aides, was both simple and ruthless. Diana's legacy, he believed, needed protection, not only from external media exploitation, but from internal misalignment and miscommunication. He had watched, carefully and quietly, as Harry and Meghan had sometimes operated in ways that were high-profile, unpredictable, and he believed, potentially damaging to the careful stewardship of Diana's name. While their intentions may have been genuine, the execution, in William's eyes, had left openings for public misinterpretation, media frenzy, and personal narrative building. Insiders say that William's decision was finalized in a private series of discussions with Catherine, key trustees of Diana's charities, and select palace officials. These were not hastily arranged meetings. They were deliberate, strategic, and tightly controlled. William wanted to ensure that when the announcement, or more accurately, the enforcement of this decision, was revealed, there would be no ambiguity, no loopholes, and no room for dispute. Catherine, known for her poise, diplomacy, and unwavering focus, was the perfect partner for this. She had earned William's trust not just as his wife, but as a capable leader, a strategic thinker, and someone who understood both public perception and royal protocol. But the shock didn't end with the decision itself. It was the way it was communicated. William did not simply send an email, call a meeting, or issue a directive. The Sussexes were blindsided. Palace insiders reveal that the first time Harry and Meghan truly understood the magnitude of William's move was through a formal communication, a letter sent directly to their private office, outlining the scope of Catherine's responsibilities and, importantly, their own exclusion. The wording, meticulously crafted, was clear and unambiguous. It left no room for negotiation, no room for misinterpretation, and, most importantly, no room for Harry and Meghan to claim involvement. And yet, what makes this decision truly remarkable is not the exclusion itself, but the psychology behind it. William, ever conscious of legacy, symbolism, and optics, knew that by placing Catherine at the center of Diana-related initiatives, he was sending a message far beyond the palace walls. He was signaling to the public, the media, and the global community that the future of Diana's legacy would be handled with precision, care, and continuity. He was also sending a private message to Harry and Meghan that control, authority, and influence over family legacy are not guaranteed by birth alone. They are earned through responsibility, discretion, and alignment with the family's long-term vision. This was a calculated shockwave, not a reactionary impulse. William's advisors compare it to a chess game, where every piece must be strategically positioned before a critical move is revealed. Catherine is the queen in this scenario, versatile, influential, and central to the execution of strategy. Harry and Meghan, once considered active players in Diana's charitable world, have been moved to the sidelines, forced to watch from a distance as the narrative unfolds without them. Of course, the palace is a web of loyalties, tensions, and personal dynamics. William's move did not occur in a vacuum. There were long-standing concerns about media exploitation, public perception, and previous incidents where Harry and Meghan's actions, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, had created friction. These included high-profile interviews, social media announcements, and independent charity initiatives that, while well-intentioned, occasionally diverged from the established narrative of Diana's legacy. From William's perspective, centralizing control under Catherine was not merely a protective measure. It was a necessary recalibration. And yet, this story is not just about strategy, it is also about emotion. For William, the decision carried personal stakes. Diana was his mother, a guiding light whose memory shaped his sense of duty, responsibility, and public service. Protecting her legacy was deeply personal, intertwined with grief, admiration, and a desire to honor her in the most authentic way possible. Catherine, who had grown into her role as the family's stabilizing figure, was entrusted with this sacred duty. Together, they would ensure that Diana's legacy would not be diluted, misrepresented, or politicized by anyone, inside or outside the family. For Harry, the blow was profound. Sources close to the Sussexes describe a sense of disbelief, frustration, and private anger. How could his own brother, someone he had trusted implicitly, decide to shut him out of his mother's legacy entirely? The decision was not just a professional or ceremonial slight, it was deeply personal. It cut to the core of identity, belonging, and family loyalty. And Meghan, who had navigated countless public controversies alongside Harry, now faced the added challenge of reconciling her personal ambitions with this new, imposed limitation. The palace itself braced for the ripple effects. Staff members, advisors, and charity trustees were instructed to align with William and Catherine's vision, reinforcing the centralization of control. Any misstep, any deviation, could be met with formal correction. The message was clear. Diana's legacy would no longer be a collaborative or contested space. It would be curated, managed, and presented according to a precise plan, ensuring that her image, her charitable work, and her memory would remain consistent with William and Catherine's intentions. And the public? They are only beginning to grasp the significance. Headlines have already speculated about family tension, exclusion, and betrayal. Royal commentators and journalists are dissecting the implications for future events, anniversaries, and public appearances. Social media chatter ranges from sympathy for the Sussexes to praise for Catherine's leadership. In the court of public opinion, narratives are being formed even as this story continues to unfold behind closed doors. Yet, despite the meticulous planning, one element remains uncertain. How will Harry and Meghan respond? Will they accept their exclusion, retreating quietly into their private world? Or will they confront the decision, publicly or privately, setting off a new wave of tension and scrutiny? The palace can prepare for optics, manage events, and guide messaging, but human emotion, particularly among those who feel betrayed, cannot be fully controlled. As the shockwave spreads, one truth becomes clear. This is more than a story about charities, titles, or royal protocol. It is a story about family, power, and the unyielding consequences of decisions made at the highest levels. It is about the delicate balance between public duty and private loyalty, between legacy and personal ambition. And it is about the moment when one brother decided, with absolute certainty, that only one person would be entrusted to protect their mother's memory. The moment William made his decision, Catherine's world shifted as well. She had long been aware of her husband's vision for Diana's legacy, but until that decisive day, the full scope of her responsibility had remained just a whisper among palace insiders. Suddenly, she was no longer just a supportive partner. She was the steward of one of the most iconic legacies the world had ever known. Charities, public events, tributes, global commemorations, all would pass through her hands. The weight of expectation was monumental. Imagine for a moment stepping into this role. You are tasked with honoring the memory of a woman who captured hearts worldwide, whose compassion changed countless lives, and whose every action was scrutinized under the unforgiving gaze of global media. Your every decision will be dissected by journalists, royal commentators, and social media users. Every appearance you make will be compared to Diana's, every word you speak analyzed for tone, intent, and authenticity. And at the same time, you are aware that two highly publicized figures, Harry and Meghan, are watching from the sidelines, ready to challenge, critique, or question any misstep. The pressure is almost unimaginable. Catherine accepted the role with remarkable poise. Sources describe her as calm yet strategic, balancing her personal reverence for Diana with a clear understanding of public expectations. She immediately began mapping out a plan for overseeing the full scope of Diana's legacy. This included charities such as the Diana Award, organizations focused on mental health, anti-landmine initiatives, HIV/AIDS awareness, and countless smaller causes that had been championed by Diana herself. Catherine's approach was methodical. Each charity, event, and public initiative would be reviewed, assessed, and aligned with a broader narrative that honored Diana while reinforcing continuity in the monarchy. But why Catherine? Why not share the responsibility, as many royal observers had assumed would happen? Insiders say the reasoning is twofold. First, Catherine has consistently demonstrated a capacity for leadership under pressure. She manages public appearances, family obligations, and philanthropic responsibilities with a balance of grace and effectiveness that few can match. Second, there is an emotional element. William trusts Catherine implicitly. He knows she shares his desire to honor Diana authentically, without the interference of personal agendas, media manipulation, or unpredictable behavior. Catherine is not just a figurehead. She is a guardian of intent, someone who will preserve the integrity of Diana's legacy in every possible way. The scope of Catherine's new responsibilities is staggering. She will oversee annual memorials, ensure that Diana's charitable organizations operate efficiently, coordinate with international partners, and serve as the public face of Diana's memory in media appearances. She will also manage sensitive communications, deciding when and how information is shared about Diana's past projects, public engagements, and ongoing initiatives. Essentially, Catherine has become the gatekeeper, the arbiter, and the spokesperson for a legacy that spans continents and generations. And while Catherine embraced this role with determination, she also understood the delicate political and familial dynamics at play. The Sussexes, though excluded, remain high-profile members of the royal family. Any misstep or overreach could spark conflict. Catherine's strategy, therefore, is not just about honoring Diana. It is also about managing perception. By projecting calm authority and measured decision-making, she reinforces the monarchy's stability while subtly signaling to Harry and Meghan that the boundaries are non-negotiable. Insiders reveal that Catherine has been working closely with charity trustees to ensure alignment. Meetings, sometimes late into the evening, focus on future strategies, potential risks, and media coordination. Every initiative is analyzed for public impact, potential controversy, and long-term sustainability. Catherine is not merely participating. She is leading, shaping the legacy with a precision that would have impressed Diana herself. Yet, the emotional stakes cannot be ignored. Catherine has long admired Diana, not just as a public figure, but as the mother of her children and a model of compassion and duty. Taking on this role requires a delicate balance, honoring Diana's warmth, empathy, and openness while maintaining the structured, disciplined approach required of a modern monarch. Catherine must navigate public scrutiny, familial tensions, and personal expectations simultaneously, all while upholding the dignity of Diana's memory. And then there is the public narrative. Royal commentators, journalists, and social media users are already framing Catherine's role in various ways. Some praise her as the rightful steward of Diana's legacy, while others speculate about potential tension with Harry and Meghan. Catherine's every move will be interpreted through multiple lenses. A public appearance at a charity gala, a speech at a memorial, or even a simple statement about Diana could be analyzed as an act of inclusion, exclusion, or subtle criticism. The stakes are constant, the scrutiny relentless, and the responsibility immense. The palace itself has been adapting to this new arrangement. Staff members, advisors, and charity coordinators have been instructed to align with Catherine's leadership. Communication channels have been streamlined to ensure that any Diana-related activity passes through her oversight. Decision-making protocols have been tightened. In short, the centralization of control is absolute. No charity can announce an initiative, no public event can be planned, and no media engagement can occur without Catherine's approval. William's decision has created a new command structure, one that positions Catherine at the center of the narrative and ensures that Diana's legacy is managed with consistency and care. Yet, despite this meticulous planning, there are unpredictable elements. Harry and Meghan, though excluded, retain influence through public perception and media presence. Catherine must navigate not only the operational demands of the role, but also the subtle, ongoing tension between the official narrative and the Sussexes' potential reactions. Every decision, every public appearance, and every strategic move must account for both operational efficacy and public optics. It is a delicate dance of influence, authority, and perception. Catherine's leadership style is also noteworthy. Unlike previous royal interventions that might rely heavily on public statements or media-driven narratives, Catherine prefers a measured, behind-the-scenes approach. She builds consensus among trustees, carefully plans media interactions, and ensures that messaging aligns with long-term objectives. Her calm demeanor and strategic focus make her an effective counterbalance to the unpredictable energy often associated with Harry and Meghan. But there is another layer: Catherine's personal investment. This is not merely a duty or assignment. It is an opportunity to honor Diana authentically. Sources close to the royal family describe Catherine as deeply committed to ensuring that Diana's work continues to make tangible impact. From mental health initiatives to educational programs, from anti-landmine campaigns to global humanitarian efforts, Catherine approaches each project with both reverence and practicality. Her decisions are guided by a combination of strategic insight, personal empathy, and a deep understanding of the symbolic importance of Diana's legacy. As Catherine assumes full control, she is also aware of the potential fallout. Excluding Harry and Meghan could trigger public debate, media scrutiny, and even private tension within the family. Yet, sources indicate that Catherine views this not as a risk, but as a necessary step. By centralizing responsibility, she ensures that Diana's legacy is preserved, respected, and effectively managed for generations to come. And while the public sees the polished appearances, the speeches, and the charitable initiatives, the true story unfolds behind closed doors. Late-night meetings, strategy sessions, and private consultations define Catherine's daily life. Every decision carries emotional weight, every choice is scrutinized internally, and every initiative is carefully planned to avoid controversy. It is a monumental responsibility, one that requires resilience, patience, and unwavering focus. So, as Catherine steps fully into her role, the world watches, unaware of the intricate planning, emotional complexity, and strategic foresight involved. Diana's legacy, once a shared space of memory and homage, has now been concentrated under the stewardship of one woman. Her influence, her compassion, and her public image are in Catherine's hands. Every decision will ripple outward, affecting charities, global events, and, inevitably, the Sussexes themselves. And yet, despite the careful orchestration, one question looms large. How will Harry and Meghan react to this exclusion? Will they accept the decision quietly, or will they challenge it in ways that could disrupt Catherine's plans, expose palace tensions, and trigger global media storms? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. Catherine's exclusive role has set the stage for a dramatic, high-stakes chapter in the ongoing story of Diana's legacy, and the next moves are about to be revealed. Harry and Meghan had been operating under a comfortable assumption that their connection to Diana's legacy was secure, unquestioned, and almost a given. After all, they were Diana's son and his wife, active participants in royal events, occasionally appearing at charitable functions, and publicly expressing their admiration and commitment to causes dear to her heart. To them, the narrative was simple. They were entitled to a seat at the table when it came to anything associated with the late Princess of Wales. But the reality, unbeknownst to them, was about to collide with that assumption in a way that would feel almost surreal. Insiders report that both Harry and Meghan were living in a bubble of expectation, anticipating upcoming announcements, events, and opportunities where their involvement would naturally be recognized. They believed the palace would continue to honor their historical and emotional connection to Diana, and in private conversations, they even strategized about which causes to champion next, which tributes to participate in, and which global initiatives to take on. Harry, in particular, had been reflecting privately on the symbolic weight of Diana's legacy. For him, it wasn't just about public appearances or charitable contributions. It was deeply personal. Every initiative tied to Diana represented an ongoing bond with his mother, a way to honor her life, her compassion, and her enduring influence on the world. To be part of those decisions was to maintain a connection to her that transcended ceremony. Yet, according to insiders, his anticipation was underpinned by a subtle tension, a lingering worry that William might assert more control than expected. Meghan, on the other hand, approached the situation with a blend of optimism and strategy. She understood that association with Diana's legacy could solidify her place within royal circles, enhance public perception, and create opportunities for philanthropic influence. While critics often depicted her as ambitious, insiders describe Meghan as being genuinely interested in aligning with Diana's causes, blending personal passion with calculated engagement. She had been preparing, in private, potential appearances, speeches, and initiatives that she believed would complement Harry's involvement. The couple's anticipation grew as whispers circulated among palace staff and media outlets. Rumors of an upcoming announcement regarding Diana-related initiatives sparked a flurry of speculation. Harry and Meghan, eager to remain proactive, began discussing ways to position themselves favorably in advance. They debated which events to attend, which charities to highlight, and how to craft statements that would underscore their connection to Diana's mission. It was a delicate balancing act. Too much visibility could be perceived as overstepping, but too little could appear as disinterest. This anticipation, however, was built on a fragile assumption. Neither Harry nor Meghan had been informed of William and Catherine's plans to centralize control entirely under Catherine. The Sussexes' expectations were rooted in years of informal participation and historical precedent, not in any concrete communication or formal confirmation. And that gap between expectation and reality would soon become a source of profound shock. As the date of the announcement approached, sources described the couple as increasingly anxious. Meetings with their advisors were punctuated by strategic discussions about public perception and media narratives. They rehearsed potential responses, drafted statements, and even considered how social media engagement could reinforce their commitment to Diana's causes. In many ways, they were preparing for a celebration of their roles, a recognition of their place in the legacy they had long claimed as their own. But behind the polished exterior, there was a subtle undercurrent of insecurity. Harry, sensitive to perceived slights and historical patterns of favoritism, couldn't entirely shake the worry that William might attempt to exert greater control. Meghan, equally savvy, recognized the palace's penchant for centralized decision-making and the subtle ways in which influence could be constrained. Yet, despite these concerns, neither anticipated the full extent of what was about to unfold. Then came the communication, a formal letter delivered to the Sussexes' private office. Insiders describe it as concise, unequivocal, and meticulously worded. The letter outlined Catherine's exclusive stewardship of Diana's legacy, detailing her role in charities, tributes, and public events, and explicitly stating that Harry and Meghan would not participate in these areas. It was not an invitation to dialogue, nor a request for approval. It was a directive. The shock was immediate. Harry reportedly read the letter in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the formal language with the emotional reality. Meghan, initially incredulous, followed with her own private reflections on what this exclusion meant for their public image, philanthropic ambitions, and personal connection to Diana. The couple had expected recognition. Instead, they faced exclusion. They had anticipated collaboration. Instead, they were confronted with finality. The palace atmosphere during this revelation was tense. Staff who were present recall a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and silent contemplation. It wasn't just the content of the letter that stunned them. It was the clarity and finality of William's decision. There would be no shared responsibilities, no compromise, no acknowledgement of past participation. Catherine's role was singular, central, and absolute. The Sussexes' assumption that they were integral to Diana's legacy had been dismantled in an instant. From a psychological perspective, the impact of such a revelation cannot be understated. Harry and Meghan had invested not only time and effort, but emotional energy into Diana's legacy. Their expectation of involvement was intertwined with identity, familial connection, and personal values. The sudden exclusion represented not just a professional slight, but a deeply personal blow, one that challenged their understanding of family dynamics, trust, and loyalty. Social media, though unaware at this stage, would soon amplify the story. Experts note that when high-profile figures experience exclusion or perceived betrayal, public interest surges. Anticipation, speculation, and emotional investment among audiences can reach unprecedented levels, creating a perfect storm for media scrutiny. Harry and Meghan's reaction, or lack thereof, would become a subject of intense analysis, with every gesture, statement, and appearance dissected for clues about their emotional state and intentions. Yet, even in the face of this exclusion, Harry and Meghan were already beginning to strategize their next moves. Insiders suggest that Harry considered reaching out privately to William for clarification or discussion, weighing the potential benefits against the risk of public perception. Meghan, meanwhile, reportedly began reviewing alternative avenues for philanthropic engagement, seeking ways to maintain visibility and impact despite being sidelined. The tension was not only personal, but symbolic. Harry and Meghan's exclusion signaled a broader message about authority, stewardship, and the management of legacy within the monarchy. Diana's work, which had once been a shared space for her children, was now firmly centralized under Catherine's leadership. The implications extended beyond individual pride or ambition. They touched on public perception, media narratives, and the very structure of influence within the royal family. As the couple processed this revelation, sources describe a mixture of emotions: disbelief, frustration, strategic calculation, and even anger. How could a family, ostensibly united by shared history and mutual respect, enforce such a stark separation? The answer, according to palace insiders, lies in William's calculated approach. By establishing a singular point of responsibility, he ensures clarity, continuity, and control over Diana's legacy, regardless of public opinion or private resentment. The anticipation that had once filled Harry and Meghan with excitement and opportunity had evaporated, replaced by uncertainty and tension. Their carefully planned expectations, their envisioned roles in public events, and their anticipation of acknowledgement, all were swept aside by a single, decisive move. And yet, the story was far from over. How they would respond, how Catherine would navigate this new dynamic, and what ripple effects would emerge in the public and media spheres were questions that no one could answer yet. But one thing was clear: the anticipation, the expectations, and the carefully constructed assumptions of the Sussexes had collided with reality in a way that would reverberate far beyond Kensington Palace. And what came next? Their first reactions, private conversations, and potential public statements would set the stage for a dramatic chapter in the ongoing saga of Diana's legacy and the royal family itself. The world would soon witness the fallout, but in this moment, the anticipation, the shock, and the emotional weight of exclusion were all that mattered. And the question that lingered in every mind, both inside and outside the palace, was simple yet devastating. How would Harry and Meghan respond to being shut out of a legacy they believed was theirs by birthright? It was a letter that would change everything. Not a brief note, not a casual email, but a formal, meticulously crafted document that arrived at Harry and Meghan's private office. A document that, for insiders, became the defining moment in the unfolding saga of Diana's legacy. By the time Harry and Meghan opened it, their anticipation of recognition, participation, and acknowledgement had been shattered. From the outside, one might imagine the letter as nothing more than a bureaucratic formality. Yet, the words contained within carried the full weight of William's decision. Catherine would oversee every single Diana-related charity, public tribute, commemoration, and global initiative. Harry and Meghan, explicitly, were to have no involvement whatsoever. There was no room for negotiation, no implied inclusion, no subtle phrasing that could soften the blow. It was clear, concise, and absolute, a line drawn in ink that could not be erased. Imagine, for a moment, reading those words. Harry, who had lived his entire life under the shadow of the public eye, who had publicly expressed his devotion to his mother's memory, found himself facing an unthinkable reality. He was excluded. Excluded not by circumstance, not by chance, but by deliberate, calculated decision. Meghan, who had invested significant emotional energy and strategic planning into aligning herself with Diana's causes, was similarly shut out. For both, it was a moment that combined shock, disbelief, and deep personal hurt. Sources inside the palace described the delivery of the letter as intentionally private. It was not accompanied by fanfare, explanation, or discussion. There were no aides present to interpret tone or soften phrasing. It was meant to speak for itself, and it did, loudly. Harry reportedly read the document multiple times, attempting to reconcile the formal language with the emotional weight of its content. Meghan's response, according to insiders, was a mix of incredulity and controlled composure, knowing that any outward reaction could become fodder for media coverage and speculation. The wording of the letter was strategic. Every sentence, every phrase, was designed to convey authority and finality. Phrases like exclusive stewardship, centralized responsibility, and without exception, left no room for ambiguity. By framing Catherine's role in such absolute terms, William ensured that Harry and Meghan could neither claim involvement nor create the perception of partial authority. It was a masterclass in bureaucratic precision, designed to assert control while minimizing public conflict, at least in theory. And yet, the impact was immediate and personal. Harry, who had long prided himself on his connection to Diana's legacy, felt a sense of betrayal, not only from the decision itself, but from the method of communication. A formal letter, devoid of personal discussion, represented not only exclusion but a lack of familial acknowledgement. Meghan, aware of the optics and implications, immediately recognized the broader consequences. Public perception, charitable impact, and the symbolic severing of their link to one of the most cherished royal figures in history. Insiders reveal that the couple's initial reaction was private, intense, and emotionally charged. Harry reportedly paced, rereading sentences, trying to make sense of the definitive language. Meghan, meanwhile, reviewed potential courses of action, analyzing how this exclusion might affect both their public image and their ongoing philanthropic efforts. Their anticipation, carefully nurtured over months of planning and expectation, had collapsed, replaced by uncertainty and frustration. But it wasn't just the content of the letter that shocked them, it was what it represented. In one fell swoop, William had reasserted authority over Diana's legacy, centralizing decision-making under Catherine and signaling that any attempt to circumvent this arrangement would be seen as overstepping. For Harry and Meghan, this wasn't just a professional slight. It was a profound challenge to their roles within the family and their perceived connection to their mother's memory. The letter was, in essence, both a declaration of control and a test of compliance. The palace, of course, anticipated the reaction. Sources indicate that William and Catherine were aware that the letter would provoke strong emotions, but believed that a firm, unambiguous communication was necessary to prevent ambiguity, rumor, or internal conflict. By formalizing the decision in writing, William not only protected the integrity of Diana's legacy, but also created a clear record, leaving no room for dispute over intent or authority. It was a calculated move, strategic, deliberate, and unavoidable. From a psychological perspective, the letter represented a form of absolute boundary setting. William understood the risks, both emotional and public, but he also understood that ambiguity could be far more damaging. If Harry and Meghan believed they had influence, even partially, they could inadvertently undermine Catherine's leadership, create conflicting messages, or generate media scrutiny that would dilute Diana's legacy. The letter ensured clarity, absoluteness, and control. Harry's reaction, according to insiders, oscillated between disbelief, anger, and quiet contemplation. Meghan, whose strategic thinking often complements Harry's emotional instincts, immediately began considering alternative pathways. Could they circumvent the letter? Could they influence charities independently? Should they respond publicly, or would silence be more effective? Every option carried risk, and the stakes were enormous. The eyes of the world were already on them, and any misstep could intensify scrutiny. Meanwhile, Catherine's position was strengthened. By being named the sole steward, she gained not only authority but also symbolic prominence. Every charity initiative, every public tribute, and every global event connected to Diana now passed through her guidance. Her role was no longer one of supportive spouse or behind-the-scenes participant. It was central, authoritative, and irrevocable. She now embodied the official link between the monarchy and Diana's enduring influence. And yet, this formalized exclusion raised broader questions about family dynamics. Harry and Meghan, though sidelined, were powerful figures whose reactions could not be fully controlled. Their exclusion risked public backlash, potential media campaigns, and scrutiny from global audiences who had long celebrated their connection to Diana. The letter, while clear and absolute on paper, did not guarantee compliance, silence, or acquiescence in practice. In the days following the delivery, the couple reportedly engaged in private conversations, attempting to process the emotional weight and practical implications. They discussed potential public messaging, media strategy, and how to maintain relevance in charitable and global initiatives without infringing on Catherine's exclusive stewardship. Their anticipation had shifted from expectation to strategizing, but the letter's language made it clear boundaries were non-negotiable. The broader implications of the letter were not limited to Harry and Meghan alone. Charity trustees, palace staff, and international partners were now required to navigate this new reality. Every event, every initiative, every public communication required alignment with Catherine. The letter had effectively redrawn the operational map of Diana's legacy, concentrating authority in a single, controlled stream. It was a masterstroke of strategic control, but also a source of potential tension. As the Sussexes grappled with this sudden exclusion, the palace braced for ripple effects. Staff and advisors recognized that human emotion cannot be fully managed, and that the letter's clarity, while necessary, could provoke responses that were unpredictable and potentially disruptive. Every public appearance, social media post, and media interview would be scrutinized, analyzed, and interpreted in light of this exclusion. The stakes were high, and the consequences of missteps even higher. Yet, despite the shock, there was one glimmer of insight that Harry and Meghan could not ignore. The letter represented not only exclusion but also clarity. For the first time, they had definitive guidance on their role, or, rather, the absence of one, in Diana's legacy. It was a stark, undeniable reality, one that demanded adaptation, reflection, and careful planning. How they would respond, privately or publicly, would define the next chapter of their relationship with the royal family and their public personas. And just when the dust seemed to settle, insiders reveal that a second, even more unexpected message arrived shortly after. A subtle but strategic communication that hinted at future developments, potential media coordination, and ways Catherine intended to manage public perception. Harry and Meghan, still reeling from the initial shock, had no idea that this next step would set the stage for an even more dramatic confrontation, one that could alter public understanding of Diana's legacy and their place within it, forever. Behind every bold decision lies a rationale, sometimes obvious, sometimes hidden beneath layers of strategy, emotion, and history. In the case of William's dramatic choice to centralize Diana's legacy under Catherine, the reasoning was as complex as it was deliberate. To understand why William made this move, we need to explore not only the operational and public aspects, but also the deeply personal motivations that shaped his decision. At its core, William's choice was about protection. Diana's legacy is one of the most revered and closely scrutinized in modern history. It spans continents, cultures, and generations, encompassing charities, humanitarian efforts, and symbolic gestures that continue to inspire millions. William, who has witnessed firsthand the media frenzy surrounding his mother's life, understood that without careful stewardship, this legacy could be diluted, misrepresented, or exploited. In his view, centralizing responsibility under someone he trusted implicitly, Catherine, was not just strategic, it was essential. But strategy alone does not explain the emotional weight behind this decision. William's connection to his mother was deeply personal. Diana shaped his worldview, instilled in him a sense of duty, and inspired his commitment to charitable work. The pain of her absence, the intensity of public scrutiny, and the occasional missteps by others in representing her image all contributed to William's desire to take decisive action. Protecting Diana's legacy was, for William, inseparable from honoring her memory. It was both a responsibility and a deeply felt obligation. Insiders reveal that William considered multiple scenarios before finalizing his decision. He weighed the benefits of shared involvement with Harry and Meghan against the potential risks. Harry and Meghan, while often well-intentioned, had a history of publicized deviations, high-profile interviews, and media-driven initiatives that sometimes complicated royal narratives. William reportedly concluded that partial oversight could introduce inconsistencies, misinterpretations, or conflicts that might ultimately undermine Diana's charitable work. The solution, he decided, was unequivocal control under a trusted partner, Catherine. Catherine's selection was no accident. Her calm demeanor, organizational acumen, and public credibility made her the ideal steward. William knew that with her at the helm, Diana's legacy would be managed with care, precision, and continuity. It was not merely about trust. It was about competency, foresight, and the ability to navigate complex public and charitable landscapes. In many ways, Catherine embodies the balance William sought. A combination of personal devotion to Diana's memory and the practical skill to manage global initiatives effectively. Yet, there was also a psychological element. By consolidating control under Catherine, William sent a subtle, but unmistakable, message to Harry and Meghan. Legacy is earned, not assumed. Being a child of Diana does not automatically grant authority over her charitable work or public image. The Sussexes' previous assumptions of entitlement, fueled by media coverage and their own public visibility, were directly challenged by this decision. William's approach underscores a principle that is both strategic and deeply personal. Responsibility, alignment, and discretion are prerequisites for stewardship. The decision also reflects a broader philosophy about legacy itself. William is acutely aware that Diana's impact extends far beyond personal connection or family history. Her work touches millions of lives, and her image carries symbolic weight around the globe. Mismanagement, even inadvertent, could tarnish that legacy or alter public perception. By placing Catherine in charge, William sought to create a singular, consistent narrative that preserves Diana's memory while ensuring that her charitable work remains effective and authentic. In making this choice, William also considered the optics. Public perception matters enormously in the modern monarchy. Diana's legacy is cherished not just for its charitable impact, but for its emotional resonance. The monarchy must maintain credibility, demonstrate continuity, and honor the public's expectations. William's decision to centralize control with Catherine signals both stability and intentionality. It assures the public that Diana's legacy will not be left vulnerable to misinterpretation, media spin, or conflicting personal narratives. Insiders note that William's deliberation was meticulous. He did not rush the decision. He consulted advisors, charity trustees, and senior staff. He evaluated past events where Harry and Meghan's involvement had inadvertently sparked controversy or confusion. He assessed the potential consequences of partial oversight versus exclusive stewardship. And ultimately, he concluded that centralization was the only path that guaranteed the integrity of Diana's work, her image, and her memory. Yet, emotional considerations were inseparable from strategy. William's decision reflects a deep desire to honor his mother in a way that aligns with both personal values and public expectations. It is a balancing act between familial loyalty and institutional responsibility. Protecting Diana's legacy required firmness, clarity, and decisiveness, qualities William demonstrated through the letter, the communication strategy, and the careful planning of Catherine's exclusive role. There is also an element of foresight. William is aware that royal dynamics are constantly evolving, and that public opinion can shift rapidly. By establishing a singular point of control now, he preemptively mitigates risks associated with future misunderstandings, media scrutiny, or conflicting narratives. Catherine's leadership ensures that every initiative, every tribute, and every public event is consistent, reinforcing a stable and coherent image of Diana's legacy. But William's reasoning was not solely operational. Sources emphasize that it was also deeply personal. The choice reflects his sense of duty to his mother, his commitment to family, and his belief in protecting her memory from potential mismanagement. It is a decision rooted in love, respect, and a profound understanding of the symbolic power Diana's life continues to wield. At the same time, William's move is strategic in the long-term sense of monarchy. By centralizing Diana's legacy, he reinforces Catherine's position within the royal family as a capable and authoritative figure. This ensures continuity in charitable leadership, public perception, and ceremonial engagement. It also subtly establishes boundaries with Harry and Meghan, clarifying roles, responsibilities, and influence within the family hierarchy. This combination of strategy, emotion, and foresight is what makes the decision so remarkable. It is not simply about exclusion. It is about protecting, preserving, and strengthening the legacy of one of the most beloved figures in modern history. It is about ensuring that Diana's memory is honored in a way that is both authentic and sustainable. And it is about asserting authority in a family dynamic that has often been complex, unpredictable, and emotionally charged. Of course, not everyone agrees with William's approach. Critics argue that excluding Harry and Meghan could create unnecessary tension, media scrutiny, and public debate. Some royal commentators suggest that collaboration might have been a more inclusive and conciliatory approach. Yet, insiders stress that William's primary concern was not optics or perception, it was the integrity of Diana's legacy. By making a firm, clear, and decisive move, he ensured that her charitable work, her image, and her memory are safeguarded for the future. And while the rationale is clear to William, Catherine, and select palace insiders, the consequences for Harry and Meghan remain uncertain. Their exclusion, though intentional, has emotional, strategic, and public dimensions that cannot be fully controlled. How they respond, privately or publicly, will influence not only their own standing, but also the perception of Diana's legacy, the monarchy, and the family dynamics at large. As the palace adjusts to this new structure, one thing becomes evident. William's decision was more than a simple administrative choice. It is a statement of principle, a demonstration of foresight, and an act of emotional stewardship. By placing Catherine at the center, he ensures clarity, consistency, and authenticity. By excluding Harry and Meghan, he establishes boundaries, asserts authority, and protects the legacy of his mother with precision. Yet, for all the clarity and reasoning, one question looms. How will Harry and Meghan process this exclusion, both privately and publicly? Their next moves, insiders warn, could challenge, complicate, or even reshape the narrative that William and Catherine have so carefully constructed. And what comes next, their reactions, strategic decisions, and potential public statements, could trigger a chain of events that no one in the palace can fully predict. But just when it seemed that the reasoning behind William's decision was fully understood, a new revelation surfaced, one that adds an unexpected layer of intrigue, personal emotion, and high-stakes drama to the story of Diana's legacy. As soon as William's decision became known within the inner corridors of the palace, a quiet storm began to brew. Behind the polished doors and historical halls of Kensington and Buckingham, whispers started. Some staff were stunned. Some were quietly supportive. Others, deeply loyal to Harry and Meghan, or sympathetic to their predicament, worried about the long-term implications of such a sharp, unilateral move. The reaction was immediate, complex, and emotionally charged. Palace insiders described the first wave of responses as a mixture of disbelief and cautious approval. On one hand, many senior aides and advisors understood William's reasoning. Diana's legacy was invaluable, both symbolically and practically, and ensuring it remained consistent, coherent, and carefully managed was paramount. For them, Catherine's appointment as the sole steward made sense. She had proven herself capable, poised, and consistent in the public eye, a reliable figure who could navigate the treacherous waters of charitable work, media scrutiny, and global attention. Yet, not everyone shared this perspective. Certain members of the palace household and royal staff expressed concern over the potential fallout. The Sussexes were not absent from public consciousness, and their exclusion was bound to provoke reactions, private or public, that could complicate the monarchy's carefully curated image. One senior aide reportedly remarked privately, "It's not about loyalty, it's about optics." And the optics could get messy very quickly. This sentiment was echoed by charity coordinators who had worked with Harry and Meghan in the past. They recognized that the exclusion could affect not only public perception, but also the practical operations of some Diana-related initiatives. There were also whispered debates among senior royals. While William had absolute authority as the heir, family dynamics could never be ignored. Some questioned whether the decision might drive a permanent wedge between the brothers, exacerbating historical tensions and creating an emotional divide that would reverberate far beyond charities or public events. The royal family, after all, is as much about appearances and internal cohesion as it is about protocol. One source noted, "The palace isn't just a house. It's a network of relationships. And when you disrupt one node, the effects ripple through the entire structure." Allies of William, however, were quick to defend his choice. They emphasized the clarity, decisiveness, and protective nature of his move. According to insiders, one trusted aide commented, "This is about legacy, not punishment. William is safeguarding Diana's memory. There's no room for misinterpretation or error, and Catherine is the right person to ensure it remains intact." This perspective highlights a critical aspect of William's strategy. He framed the decision not as exclusion for the sake of exclusion, but as proactive stewardship designed to protect a global legacy. Even within Catherine's circle, there was a sense of cautious optimism mixed with pressure. She understood the weight of the responsibility, the scrutiny she would face, and the inevitable comparisons to Diana herself. Staff close to Catherine describe long nights of planning, strategy sessions, and coordination with charity trustees to ensure that Diana's legacy would be handled flawlessly. Catherine's leadership style, careful, precise, and empathetic, was designed to navigate both internal palace dynamics and the broader public narrative. Every decision she made would be analyzed, every public appearance scrutinized, and every initiative measured against the gold standards set by Diana. Meanwhile, critics of William's decision began to voice their concerns, albeit discreetly, given the intense scrutiny surrounding any royal commentary. Some argued that excluding Harry and Meghan entirely could be seen as unnecessarily harsh, potentially fueling public debate, media speculation, and social media outrage. In particular, supporters of the Sussexes noted that their previous involvement in Diana-related charities had been genuine, visible, and impactful.